Now, hi everyone, and welcome to the Collective Conspiracy Show. Thank you very much for joining. Tonight is going to be, in my opinion, a hot topic, probably controversial for a few people. It might get a few heated comments on the comment section, but please just be respectful. One thing I want to outline at the top of the show is that at no point do we disrespect anyone that has died. At no point do we disrespect anyone that has gone through heartache or whatever throughout this whole the recent 3-4 month pandemic. We're simply looking at facts, we're looking at figures, and we're drawing some conclusions that might differ from the mainstream media, the BBC, and other news sources that you see regularly. Andrew is going to join us. I think he's just running a little bit late, but I'll put him into the feed as soon as he arrives. But for now, I welcome back Bruce. And actually, Andrew's just joined. Perfect timing that. So let's add Andrew to the stream. Hi, Andrew. We're live.
Very good. Very good. How are you?
Very good, thank you. You're right on time. So I've just introduced you both. So we've got Bruce Fenton. I believe you're a data scientist, Bruce, by trade.
So IT and an independent researcher, multidisciplinary researcher.
And Andrew Johnson, who you might remember previously came on to discuss the moon landings, is a huge researcher, massively respected by myself and by many others in the field. And I know Andrew's been doing a lot of digging on the recent pandemic, shall we say. So, go on, Andrew, do you want to say something?
No, I was just saying thanks very much for that accolade. I'm humbled by that, really. So thank you very much. And similar background to Bruce. I think I've not met Bruce before. So hi, Bruce.
Nice to see you. And I think you've been around a year or two, because I remember many years back, I think I've seen you talking at an event, also on your YouTube. I think I've seen a couple of your videos as well. It's nice to connect with you here.
Great, yeah.
So I just want to kind of get talking, really. So the past, I say a few months, but it's been rolling on and on now. I mean, we're probably into the 6th month now, the 5th month since it's really started, and things just get crazier and crazier, literally by the day. But we're going to rewind a little bit, if people can remember, and go back that far to when it all started, and certain countries took different tacts, because obviously this virus was at a different peak in different countries at different times. Now, one thing that's being compared a lot is the lockdown model with Sweden and how other European countries did lockdown, and the difference there. And Sweden, it seems, may have reached a herd immunity. Now, herd immunity is when everybody kind of just puts themselves out there, gets it, the young, fit and healthy survive, and then they don't get bombarded with it anymore. Do you think that had a possibility of working here? Do you think the lockdown was right in any way? Now, obviously, that's a long-winded question. Take your time, answer as well as you can.
Who would you like to
start? Let's go to you.
Start with Bruce. No, start with Bruce, because I'd be interested.
Sure. I would take the perspective that not only I would say Sweden's major cities and the UK's major cities essentially have herd immunity. Now, I would say that smaller towns and villages will acquire those over time, because logically the outbreaks hit the cities hardest and first, right? So there's a lot of spread. You've got the tube systems, the bus networks, people in close contact. So we've seen that sort of Stockholm obviously had the most of an outbreak, same as London did. We've seen that around Europe. But so if you go off to some small coastal village, in North Wales or something, it can look like there's an outbreak going on, because it'll take a while for the virus to reach there. But so we can't say there's a total herd immunity, but I think we are seeing the impact of herd immunity in major cities and some of the towns, and that we will gradually see that naturally continue in that way.
Yeah, I mean, I've got sort of mixed feelings about some of these concepts, actually. I'll be honest, because I think, whenever you talk about things like herd immunity, well, you're talking about various measurements that are made to judge, the number of cases. But I think when Kieran and I last spoke, I can see some of the data that comes out, and it kind of sort of makes sense. But then again, when you learn about how that data is generated, and it's based, for example, on tests that are done for this. The number of cases in a given area is determined by this PCR test or an antibody test, maybe. But both of these have problems with how accurate they are. So, for example, this was reported early on, and we may have discussed this, Kieran, last time we spoke, so I don't want to cover old ground for too long, but the PCR test, which is used to determine whether somebody has got coronavirus, is allegedly has up to 80% false positive rate. So when you factor that in, that means that any figures that you generate about a number of cases may not be reliable. And maybe I'll say that, may not be reliable. And perhaps I should be saying are not reliable. I mean, I'm not 100% confident because I don't work in that field, So this whole idea of herd immunity, whilst that has, and that actual as a concept as well, this concept of herd immunity is only about 20 years old or 30 years old, to my understanding. That's when this concept was first described. So again, I'm a bit sort of questioning of that. And of course, this has all become very politicized now. But even let's just take the herd immunity concept as valid and the stats as generally valid. I think if you take all of that as valid and acceptable, but then you look at their own stats and you look at, for example, the number of people that are supposed to have died of this virus in the so many heads per 100,000 or million people or something. I think if I'm correct, I mean, Bruce might be able to correct me if I'm wrong, but it's about the same in Sweden as it is here. In other words, from what I've read and taking these stats, the lockdown hasn't really made any difference. And some people argue that it's actually made things worse because, again, if you go with this herd immunity concept, people that have been more locked down have been blocked from that. Or maybe it's not actually herd immunity. Maybe it's actually because they've been locked up inside and they've got less sunlight, they've got a lower vitamin D, so they've just got more sick generally, not necessarily from COVID or whatever, but they've just ended up in a worse state. They've been tested because they've got sick, the test has failed, come up positive, given an incorrect result, and then they've been counted. So I question that whole basis, really, but I don't think there's really, take all that lockdown, I don't think anyone can argue scientifically that lockdown has really made any difference to my way of looking at it.
Yeah, no, I would say actually, in fact, if you look at population to population, relative sizes, Sweden to the UK, that and again, if you take the figures that we're given, then you'd say the UK has lost far more people in terms of, if you equal us against Sweden,
right.
So we've done far worse. And lost a lot of people. But as you rightly say, the question then is, who's dying of the virus, who's dying of lockdown, but overall, we've definitely, if you were to take all these figures we're given and say, okay, let's believe them, we would seem to have more excess death than Sweden, despite us having this lockdown that's supposed to be preserving life. So clearly on that scale, it is not working in the way that it was sold to people.
Right. All. And I may have said this again last time that I came on, Kieran, but I look at this 2009 swine flu pandemic, or they didn't actually call it a pandemic. They said it was about to become a pandemic. And I distinctly remember back then, because my kids have finished school now, and my kids are 20 and 22 now, but they were at school, and we got word back from the school that they were thinking of closing the school because they were going to declare a pandemic, or they expected that to come under, various things were going to happen or something. And I thought I was just told bollocks, Yeah. And that's when I was investigating that at that time. And then when all this started happening, I went back and looked at the figures for the swine flu. And there actually less people died in 2009 than in 2008 and 2010. There was no pandemic. So in other words, all the measurements that they were using to claim all this panic and scare was all wrong. And the historical figures now show that. And I think we've already seen now, because we've had so many more people like Bruce, like other people looking at these figures, I think we can see these anomalies already. And of course, I think nearly all countries have changed the way that they report the deaths. Certainly, there was a declaration on the 31st of March on the Office of National Statistics website, and I've got it in the report that I did because somebody sort of highlighted that and sent it to me. They've changed the way that they counted the deaths, and even Hancock came out and said it a couple of weeks ago, didn't he? Oh, we might have miscounted the deaths. Yeah. So, what do we do? Where do we go with these figures? What do we do with them? It's a bit like saying, oh, well, I've got all these sparrows in my garden. I've counted them one day, and then the next door's neighbour put some bread out the next day, and they all went into his garden. But how are you going to? And it may not have been the bread. It may have been that a sparrowhawk came in and chased them all away. You just don't know the reason because they've adjusted the figures. They've said that the way they counted the figures has changed. So if you haven't got a baseline, if you haven't got a baseline to operate on, what are you going to do? With these figures.
Yeah, and then what we did was we moved from lockdown, and then the next phase was testing. They wanted to start testing people to see who had this test. And I hear today that they're ramping up more and more testing. But what's important to stress, and I know you'll both have opinions on this, is these tests, as you've already mentioned, Andrew, are proven to have a 60 to 80% false positive. This is a test that was tested in Tanzania on a pawpaw fruit and a goat and came back positive. This is a test that tests for the coronavirus, which is a much wider family, including the common cold, including the flu, including SARS. All of these can come back positive on this test that they have, not just specifically COVID-19. So if you have any common cold symptoms, you're going to come back positive. And the more they test, the more figures you're going to have as positive. That's natural. So we have this big spike now on the media where they're pushing it and pushing it. Figures are rising. Not the death figures, because they can't push that anymore because people just aren't dying because we're not in the flu season. So their next level of scaremongering is the cases, just confirmed cases, are going up and up and up. What people should realise is the cases are going up, but only 8 people died yesterday, supposedly, of COVID. Only 8. Does that show that herd immunity has worked? Does that show that the virus is being weakened? Is there any trust we can put in these tests?
I'll just add there as well. I've noticed that the media has kind of quietly moved from referring to cases as being, hospital cases to infections are now being talked of cases, right? That's a very sneaky move because before it was clear we had infections, which were widespread. Most people, no symptoms, and then we have cases where people had to go to the doctor, they were very unwell or seriously ill. And then, of course, you've got, ICU, and then of those, some that die. But now they're talking cases, and they're quite clearly referring just to infections. Now, I think that's a really sneaky move that people should keep an eye on, because those are not really cases. If these are people that have no symptoms, they're just turning up as, they're positive, those are not medical cases where they need any treatment.
Absolutely. And, when I decided to put that report together, which I think is around the time that Kieran and I last spoke, I think it was around that same time I was contacted by an immunologist from the US. She didn't give I don't think she was using an alias, because she said she'd left the pharmaceutical company that she worked for years ago from, ethical reasons, basically, or conscience. But she pointed out to me that it was very important that we distinguish between COVID-19 and SARS-CoV-2, because, of course, SARS-CoV-2 is the alleged virus, which some say doesn't really exist or not in a novel form, and COVID-19 is the disease. And I'd made the same mistake as a lot of other people in my report by conflating the two. But the other thing that she pointed out was this is what they did with AIDS, and that they conflated HIV positive with the disease known as AIDS when there's been no evidence that HIV causes AIDS. So in other words, they could go round, and they did this in the 1980s, and I remember this happening. And that was one of the few times they did a national leafleting campaign in the 1980s with AIDS. And so you could get this test, HIV test, and then if you were positive, everyone had to avoid you, because you could, if you exchanged bodily fluids with somebody, as the expression at the time said, you could kill them. They could get this disease and they could die. And that's essentially what they've now done that's how they're trying to get everyone to wear masks, because they're saying that if you have this positive test, you are a danger to other people, or you are a potential danger. But the potential word kind of gets missed. And so anybody that has this positive test now could have their lives ruined by it potentially, just on this faulty test. So as Bruce says, and a few people, and I was watching some of these videos on Anna Breese's channel she's been doing this series. I don't know whether you guys have been watching these, where and they're catching on to this now. Thankfully, what you just said about the distinction between the positive test and the infections, and they've caught on to it, thankfully. And I hope more and more people catch on to it, because it's a key. That's what they're having to do now. As you said a couple of minutes ago, they are reporting cases. And I've just written to the Derbyshire Health Authority, because I live in Derbyshire, and at the end I said, you should be imposing a moratorium on COVID-19 testing from tomorrow. And if you do that, the problem will go away. It will just disappear. And all you need to do, go back to the old way of doing things. People get sick, you treat them. You don't have a test to say, well, you might get sick. I mean, and all these people that we're going to talk about the mask, and if I may go off on one about the mask now. So all these people that are wearing masks, I'm doing it to protect others. Really? Oh, that's nice of you. Are you infected? Are you dangerous to other people? Well, I don't know. Have you had a test? Oh, no. So how do you know that you're a danger to other people? So in other words, there are many, as we could talk about the masks for hours and hours and hours, and all the ritual aspects and this, that, and the rest of it, and the muzzling aspects.
Yeah. Sure.
But there is another aspect. You are getting people implicitly also to assume that they could be a danger to somebody else with no evidence. It's not like that you put on the mask and then it goes red, to say that you're infected or something. You don't even have that. You just have a mask. And so there is a very insidious psychological trick built into this whole mask scenario. And it's like turning everyone into a terrorist. It used to only happen at the airports. You were assumed to be a terrorist at an airport until proven that you weren't. You'd been through the scanner, you had a pat down or whatever it was. But they've now extended that into the general population. And one of the Anna Breeze videos was a Muslim guy, and he was describing how they were victimized, and that's actually weird, because that's the first time I've heard a Muslim guy speak out like that about 9/11. And I knew this already, but when I watched that video, it really helped me to understand how they've been extending that victimization, from not from just the Muslim community or this group of like whoever it was that they wanted to have persecuted. They've extended it into the general population. And of course, Cressida Dick, as we know, she has played a role in that, saying, well, I hope that people are going to shame others who aren't wearing a mask.
Yeah, I just want to touch on that. I mean, firstly, just a quick final kind of closing comment on the test for those people that are watching. Something to think on. If this is such a dangerous virus, a pandemic where people are falling down, dying in the streets, that's a pandemic. If this was so dangerous, why do you need a test to tell you that you might have it? Just think on that. But now onto the masks. I think you've just touched on something there with it was the police constable, I believe, and she said that we need to start shaming people that aren't wearing masks. Now, I'm asthmatic, so I can get away with flashing an exemption card and not wearing one. But I try not to flash the exemption card. I just try to not wear one. I just refuse. But what we're doing here, and I've said this I think I've said it to you, Bruce, and I've definitely said it to you, Andrew, is we've out-sheeped the sheep, and we are now doing the police's job for them. And we're policing each other. We're leaning out of car windows, shouting at people because they're out for their second exercise for the day. We're leaning out of shop windows, shouting at someone because they haven't got a mask on and they could kill grannies. So, and this is the way it's going. And it's almost having this two-tier society where you have the masks and you have the maskless. And for a police constable to come out and say those wearing masks should shame those that aren't is such an irresponsible thing to say. Not only just because it's just a stupid thing to say, but also because of all the invisible disabilities that some people suffer from.
Yeah.
That lady not wearing a mask could be a rape victim. That man not wearing a mask could have fought for his country and be suffering from PTSD or anxiety. All these things that could be going on under the surface lead to why they might not be wearing a mask. And it's disgusting for someone in such a position, and it really shows what these people are thinking in these positions of power, to say such a thing. Now, do you think that the mask wearing is part of a divisive culture? Do you think saying that people from black and Asian ethnic minority groups have a higher case of catching it? Do you think all of these tactics are division tactics to keep us going at each other while they continue to manipulate us from above? Do you think that's possible?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, if I just may share a screen here, I did post this on Facebook, but just look at this. I mean, if that doesn't prove what you were just saying, what does? This is
let me just
not in the UK.
Up.
Don't know if you can, yeah.
Oh, hang on. I think I just did it and then removed it.
Again, I'll do
there
it
we
now.
go. Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's not UK, but it could be. This is Edmonton Police. And they've got a web page now where you can snitch online. And
Oh, have we lost him? I think
Yes.
we've lost him. Well, okay. That's a shame. Just something to throw in there while we've lost Andrew is SJ Smith saying, I work in care and we have been told that we're not allowed to wear masks at all. Now, that's interesting. SJ Smith, if you could just elaborate on that and maybe tell us why they're saying that you're not allowed to wear masks. Is there a reason for that? 'Cause that's an interesting comment. What do you make of that, Bruce?
Yeah, that's strange. I don't see why that would be the case. That why they would be doing that. I mean, other than sabotaging kind of the health of people that need, may actually need to have some additional protection. I mean, again, that goes off into the whole argument of to what degree masks are effective and all the rest of it, especially when we're worn by people that are not used to wearing them, etc. But I assume if you're trained and you have the effective medical mask in the care situation, that there is, benefit to using them. So that's, obviously kind of very counterintuitive.
Yeah, I mean, do you have any opinions on masks? I know Andrew's very, very vocal on being against.
Yeah, I mean, certainly, I think that, look, if someone says, we would like to wear them, it's not mandated, that's fine. And that's essentially what was going on before. And you could see the uptake was very small. I mean, across the UK and across Wales and England, it was very low. I think perhaps up to 5% of people, depending on where you were. Talking to other people, I'd say that figure, I did a survey, that figure seems fairly consistent. And then suddenly, of course, once it was mandated and you say they're a criminal if they're not wearing it, then it's the mask started coming out. But it was quite obvious the average person had realized that they didn't really need a mask, right? They weren't wearing them. Nobody was panicking. Nobody was wearing them really. Hardly anyone wearing them in the supermarkets or anywhere else. Throughout the whole of the epidemic, people were not really wearing them in the supermarkets, very few people. So what's going on there? That at the end, long after the epidemic we've been told an epidemic is over, and people may have missed that update, but that was over a month ago that we left the epidemic status, that we are then told that we must wear masks in supermarkets. I mean, it's bonkers, because clearly if it was spreading in supermarkets, then that's already happened. We've all been shopping throughout the whole epidemic. So why now? That's my opinion. It's just absurd. It's just absurd. Whether they work or not is no longer the point. It's just an absurd moment to pick to say they must be mandated.
Yeah, I think for me, I think you're absolutely spot on. To say it 5 months into the pandemic is silly. Once it's all but disappeared. If it was ever there to start with the inflated figures, which we'll touch on in a minute. But I think to kind of bring it in now and bring it in so haphazardly, so I guess half-assed. I mean, by me. That's exactly right. I have a Tesco Express right next door to my local pub, and I can go into the pub, buy a pint, and drink it without a mask. But to go into Tesco and buy a bottle of pop to drink, I've got to wear a mask. And I think that a lot of people, I think, bit by bit, as each legislation has been imposed, as we've gone from lockdown to you can't exercise to furlough to local lockdown, now to masks, I think people are waking up bit by bit. I think each stage is making a small portion of people kind of sit up and go, something's not right with this. And I think the mask is the latest stage to kind of be kicking into people's heads now. And I think if people keep obeying it and just keep going along with it, you've got to question how far will these people go before they do stand up and think something's not right.
Well, I mean, look, if you follow the logic of it, I mean, if it's that you need to have goggles, you need to have a mask, you should be wearing gloves. I mean, at one point they were saying women should have hairnets. I mean, the logical extension of that is, what outfit do you need to protect you from a virus? Well, you need a full biosuit. I mean, that's what you need. I mean, if you're going to go with the absolute, what do I need to protect myself from a virus? Look what the experts wear when they go into the labs to sample viruses. They wear the biosuits. So, yeah, of course your mask's not enough. Of course your gloves won't be enough. In the end, you've got the biosuit, you know, or you have to have this anti-vax, you know, you have to have the vaccine, because that's it. They can always say this isn't effective what you're wearing. You can always go further until they have you in those hazard suits, right? And who's going to wear those? Nobody. So there's always that feeling that it's not going to be 100%. So you're going to need to have the injection, right? So it's obvious they can just keep doing that. So
yeah, and
you could say you have now, right, saying, "Oh, you're evil because you don't wear a mask or something." Okay, throw it back to them. You're killing my grandma because you're not wearing a biosuit. So why aren't you wearing one? Go and order one now on eBay. Stick it on. Go up the pub in your biosuit then. Otherwise, you're killing my grandma, right? I mean, how absurd do they want to go with it? Because we can play it back at them if they want to go down that road saying that we're doing it. Well, so are you, because what you're wearing is insufficient.
Yeah, and welcome back, Andrew. Glad to have you back. Bruce just touched on something there, which I know you'll have an opinion on. He mentioned how the masks aren't good enough, but it's not just masks. A bandana can pass. A knitted scarf can pass. If these face coverings, a knitted scarf, you know, and if that can pass as a face covering for protection, do they think we're stupid? Is there more to it?
Of course, yeah, absolutely, and I agree with everything that Bruce said. You know, it's not if you just think for 5 minutes about everything we've said and more. The only sensible conclusion you can come to is that this is not about public health. It's about compliance. And as many have pointed out, the mask is a distantly visible indication of whether you're compliant or not to suggestion. You know, so in essence, you know, people could say, oh, well, they can track you with these facial recognition systems. Well, let's just say, you know, let's take any busy city. Let's just say somebody somewhere in, you know, wherever is hooked into those CCTV systems, and they can take a real-time picture of a street in, say, Manchester or Birmingham or something, put that through some AI. They're not really bothered about recognizing faces in that picture. They've got some software that can work out the likely percentage of face coverings being used. And that can then be collated on a national level, all in real time through some sophisticated software. And somebody somewhere, you know, in Westminster or wherever it is, in an underground bunker somewhere in the middle of the Antarctic or wherever it is, you know, can just get a readout. Oh, yeah, this many people are complying, or this is our statistics. Now, clearly, you know, it may not be very accurate because we don't know how that as a total population, but I can, the way that my brain works, I can see that they might be doing stuff like that. And also I've been thinking, you know, you've got to ask yourself, why hasn't Facebook been shut down more? Why? I haven't been censored on Facebook at all. I've had a couple of posts which are fact checked, I think, in all of this last 5 months or whatever it is. I think I've had literally a couple. I haven't had any posts deleted. I haven't had my account blocked, nothing. Same with YouTube. I've had one YouTube video deleted, I think, maybe two, or censored. Why? Because I think, and I know some people have been censored. Dr. Vernon Coleman is a classic example. A lot of his videos have been censored. Recommend people watch some of his videos if they haven't. Now, I think what they do is they're looking at they've got real-time software. They can, for example, monitor the number of Facebook posts that are talking about masks and slagging them off, or saying you should be doing this, you shouldn't be wearing them, against the ones that are pro that, same with Twitter. I think they can monitor all of that in real time. And then I think what they do is that feeds into some mathematical model, and then they use that to roll out the next psychological operation. see, well, when are we ready to do this, or when should we do this to get them either the maximum fear effect, or when we're getting really desperate, like they clearly are now with the local lockdowns and stuff. And I think that's how they decide it, because they can get a feel for what's going on in people's minds by watching all the internet traffic, basically, and as I say, maybe looking at doing some AI on CCTV footage from various cities.
Now, I just want to touch on censorship there, because that's a fantastic point you've brought up there. Censorship has been going on for a while now, through various ways. Certain people have had their YouTube channels demonetized and deplatformed, so they lose money. They can't get advertisement on it. I mean, the most famous one, and it's not just him, but David Icke had his YouTube channel deleted and his Facebook channel deleted and all that stuff. And surely the most rigid, I guess, BBC viewers should sit up and think, is this not the modern day version of the Nazis burning books? And I believe that it is. And if the YouTube channels are being censored, we're having Bill Gates, who we will come on to in a minute with the vaccine, but we have Bill Gates, who isn't a doctor. He isn't medically qualified. He's a computer programmer. And he is allowed to go onto any mainstream news. He's allowed to be interviewed by Mark Zuckerberg on Facebook to talk about vaccines, yet doctors, qualified doctors with years and decades of experience, epidemiologists, who this is their very field of expertise, are being censored for not talking alongside the main narrative. Now, Bruce, what do you think of that?
Yeah, I mean, this is an astonishing time where, who would have thought that we would live to see doctors and, biologists seen as conspiracy theorists alongside us. I mean, the people that have been looking into all these things for years. It's astonishing to see them losing their YouTube channels and their platforms as fast as David Icke or people that have, accused the royal family of being lizards. I mean, it's amazing to see, isn't it, that these people now, that they once were the most respected, the family doctor and the biologist looking into, viruses, that they are now censored alongside us. I mean, that's got to make the public think, what the hell is going on here? That we're all in the same boat with these people now. I mean, that in itself is an astonishing thing to see. And if people don't wake up with that, well, what are they waiting for? How many are in that boat of censorship before you start thinking, there's a bloody, agenda here, where the most respected society are in the conspiracy boat with us now? It's crazy.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree. And one of the things, because I've been sort of tracking this since day one, really. And I think it was after I set up this website, because I've got two websites, really. Well, arguably four, but cvpandemicinvestigation.com is where I've put all this COVID stuff on there. And I wanted to split that out from all the other stuff, like the moon landing stuff we mentioned, or alien stuff and all that stuff, And I deliberately did that because of this conspiracy theory sort of label and all that crap. But what's interesting, they're talking about the censorship, as Bruce just said right there. But if I now go back through that, the postings, because I've been making postings, I think now for about 3 months or something, I forget. But I was just clicking on some of the older postings, and it brings, it's a WordPress site, so it brings up the YouTubes like in an embed. It's clever enough to do that sort of automatically, more or less. And a long-winded explanation. But if I go back, I can see that they're all just got the blank, the YouTube blank, deletion on a load of them. There's a load of them now that have gone, and some of these are gone within like 24 hours. But the speed of it, and as you say, there was another one the other day about the hydroxychloroquine, and we had this convention of doctors, a summit of doctors in U.S. Supreme Court in front of there, which I guess is in Washington D.C. And there was this Dr. Emmanuel, I should remember her second name. She was African American. Yep. And she was saying, hydroxychloroquine, I've treated 300 patients. Just use that. We don't need any of this stuff. Stop the testing. Hydroxychloroquine, done. End of. Whole thing, finished. Next day, the Daily Mail has a massive hit piece on her, saying that she preaches these sermons where she talks about alien beings and alien DNA.
Yeah, accused of being a witch doctor.
Exactly. So let's just see then. So she talks about aliens. That actually affects the effectiveness of the 65-year-old drug, does it, Daily Mail? Really? So the fact that somebody talks about aliens changes the way that this drug works. Why don't you talk about that? Why don't you talk about the effectiveness of the drug based on scientific evidence rather than one doctor who prescribed it and certain words that come out of her mouth which are nothing to do with the drug, and how its effectiveness. That is what the state of journalism is with this issue. And of course, we could pick other examples, but this issue is affecting everyone in the world. As I've said, 9/11, for example, we've talked about like moonlands, whatever. That only affects a relatively small number of people. This affects everyone. So the journalists that are putting out this false information, or they're not putting out sufficient information, in the case of, say, this Daily Mail article, they're just focusing on the messenger and shooting that person down as hard as they can. They are committing. They are party. The journalist that's written that to me is party to manslaughter, really, essentially. Because that's what it's true. People that are not able to take this drug are going to die. It's a 65-year-old drug that's got a proven track record. And the Daily Mail is discouraging people from investigating it. And some people, because of that, will die. And
that just brings me on to the saviour, the thing that's going to rescue us all, a vaccine. So we're not going to trust drugs that have been trialled, as you say, for over 60 years that have countless positive results. We're going to go with a vaccine that has been rushed through in absolute record time with zero really safety testing, and we're expected to just trust that from a guy called Bill Gates, who's going to make a shed load of money from it, who's now coming out, it's almost like a comedy show, he's now coming out saying, we're going to have multiple shots of it, almost like he gets paid by the vaccine,
and that they're agonizingly painful.
People sick. Yeah. So what are your? I know you've both got some very strong thoughts on this. Bruce, we'll go with you first. But why are we being led down this? No one's telling us how to boost our immunity. No one is telling us the benefits of sunshine and exercise and healthy eating. In fact, they're giving us half price on McDonald's now. What they are telling us is you need a vaccine. What's going on there?
Yeah, as someone else pointed out. I think maybe at 21 Newswire, the guy said, it's being sold to us almost as we don't have an immune system, that the immune system does no longer exist. It's not even there to have a conversation about because you don't have one, right? That's the way it's been put. And yet the academic studies are showing that the T cells we have, I'm not going into a complex immunity, but the T cells on our first lines of defense are effective in perhaps 50% of people at resisting the infection at the start. About 50% of people, they found this in one random trial. That you've also got other immune systems where we found that there are people who have immunity from previous infections of other coronaviruses. It's similar enough that their immune system recognizes it and defeats it again, right? Second line defense. And due to genetic differences in populations, there's some people that just don't seem to be able to get it at all for various reasons, right? So at this point, it looks like only 20% of people can actually get it. Right? And there's nowhere so far that I've seen that more than 20% of a population, whether it's a ship, think how contained you are on a ship, that they don't get more than 20% infected. So you've got that being ignored, the fact that the immune system is doing very well, thank you very much, at resisting this. But that is barely being put into the news cycle. You have to go and look at these academic papers and stuff. And then we also know that if you go outside, you breathe in viruses all the time, the immune system is strengthened by that. That's how part of why you have an immune system. Exposure. You're exposed to weak viruses all the time, right? You're going out there, instead of staying at home, right? Also, you have to obviously have access to, good lifestyle, happiness, connectivity to people. All these things have been shown to boost the immune system. They're crucially important. They don't know why, but people who have a lot of connections in their life, a lot of friends, a lot of family, a lot of connections, it's proven that they get less coronaviruses and influenzas than other people. Right? So you're fracturing away all of the things that are known to give us that extra boosted immune system, which would defend against this. And we're told that, forget all that. There's no immune system in this equation anymore. There's 100% vulnerability. We're all going to get it. Probably most of us are going to die unless we get this vaccine. So it's absurdly different to the science. And we're told that we're following the science. So straight away you can see that there's essentially fraud going on there. You're being frauded by these pharmaceutical companies, their spokespeople, the media that they are funding, which unfortunately is a lot of the health media globally, which has a web back to Bill Gates. So, we've got BBC Health, we've got the Telegraph, people openly saying, you'll see funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation in there. So if you have a massive level of bias that this guy's going to make this profit, he's funding the people that are telling you what's best, and he's going to make this huge amount. I mean, where do you start with the question? You at some point think, this is not an independent media. This is not an independent pharmaceutical company. It's not an independent expert talking to you. You're being sold throughout by different salespeople that this product, and they are completely discounting your immune system, which overwhelmingly eradicates this virus. I mean, without going into a long spiel, I'll just add as well, you touched on Sweden earlier. Consider Sweden, right, who went down not the route of going for herd immunity, but they said it would be a secondary effect. Now, so where are they at? Because we keep getting told, they haven't done very well. But right now, they're supposedly, according to the world meters, whether you trust them or not, they are saying there's about 66,971 infected people in Sweden, right? Of those, 37 are serious cases. 37 out of 66,971. And do you know how many people died in the last few days? About one a day. So I would say that they've got to a very good place. And yet we're being told that, it's failed there. And that, they're going to need this vaccine as well, like everyone else. It's like, how's that failed? Right? If they're down to that, I would say that their situation is now pretty much resolved.
Yeah, and I think, Andrew, before you come in on this, I just want to throw out there that Australia are in one of the most strictest lockdowns going. I mean, Melbourne have just been announced. And I think, if I've got this right, at the last count, it was about 163 people have died in the whole of Australia, population of about 5 million or something like that. And it's very, very ridiculous. More people have killed themselves today than have died throughout the whole pandemic in Australia. And they are in one of the strictest lockdowns, and they will be until the vaccine comes along. What's your thoughts on vaccines, Andrew?
Well, I was just thinking, we have this expression that if you look at the way this has been marketed, it's, the phrase used car salesman comes to mind. But I've got a proposal. I think we should replace the phrase used car salesman with unused vaccine salesman, which is what Bill Gates is proposing. And this is really what it is. He's trying to market this unused vaccine, and he's got the world's mass media to promote it for him for free, basically. And he's basically saying, well, that's the only route. And he said this on April the 12th on BBC. And as Kieran pointed out, this guy isn't a doctor, yet he's got access to all the world's media. And he isn't being censored as a doctor, as he said this earlier. It's a very, very, very good point, worth mentioning again. The real doctors are being censored. So that shows this is another example of inversion. Everything is the wrong way around, and that extends, for example, to hospitals. Hospitals are now closed, and they are turning people away. The doctors up the road from here, they have an NHS printed sign on the door saying you must wear face coverings when you come in. Yet face coverings damage health. So the hospitals are now in a situation where they're damaging health. You can't get dental treatment unless you're half dead or your tooth's in agony from tooth. Needs pulling out whatever or dealing with. It's crazy. And going back to the vaccinations, going back to this thing about immunity that Bruce was saying, well, let's just approach this from a scientific perspective, shall we? Right, we'll have this vaccine developed, say, by Christmas, just for the sake of argument. So what we'll do is we'll get 10,000 people. We'll prove that a proportion of these are infected with the coronavirus, and they're sick. They're ill in some way. They're incapacitated in some way. And then we'll take half of those people. We'll give them multivitamins, vitamin C, vitamin D, whatever. We'll make sure they go out and get half an hour's sunshine or daylight every day or something. And then the other half, we'll just give them the vaccine, and we won't give them any extra vitamins or anything. Let's see how those two groups do on this vaccine, shall we? and then with two sets of circumstances, and then we'll just have a control group where we don't do anything. Are they going to do that with this vaccine? Has anybody in the press talked about that as being one of the tests? No, they haven't. They said they're just going to inject it, and in fact, they apparently already are doing this in some places, and hope for the best. You know, that's not science. Clearly, it's not. Perhaps I'll invent a catchphrase here. It's not science; it's compliance. You know,
I like that. I like nice little rhyme to that as well.
Yeah.
I think well, I think with the vaccines, and I know I'm just cautious. We're 3/4 of the way through now. It's with the vaccine. For me, the agenda there is where they're taking us is this kind of credit score society kind of thing, and they're already throwing it out there. I saw an article the other day about the Premier League, the football, about how you're going to have some kind of immunity passport to allow you to go and watch a game of football. You're not going to be able to travel unless you can provide your immunity documents, your health records. You're not going to be able. Your child won't go to school. You can't go to watch your favourite band in a concert. And so what I think is they're not going to pin you down and physically stick you with a needle. What they're going to do is make your life damn unlivable if you don't have this vaccine. You can't go on holiday. Your children can't go to school. You can't take your children to play school or to jungle gyms or whatever. Until you get the vaccine, until you can prove that you've got it. Now, is that not the equivalent of Nazi Germany? Show us your book. Show us your papers, where you'll start.
Other people said it's, funnily enough, this is a medical thing, isn't it? This is a medical issue that we've got to deal with. Well, actually, when you look at the 17 goals of sustainability, sustainable development goals in this Agenda 21 and Agenda 2030 document, there's this funny parallel with a lot of these, about having to meet all these rules and whatnot. And this that you described it right there, Kieran. This is about tracking you. We've got track and trace. It's about preventing the access to goods and services unless you've got the right thing stamped on you or, the right papers, but they're not papers anymore. They're electronic, chips or they're tattoos, like this ID 2020 thing. And the information is all there, and they've actually spoken about it openly. And Bill Gates has spoken about ID 2020 publicly. It's not a secret. So you can see it's all there. And it is all about tracking the population. You can do this, you can't do that. You can only do it at this time, that time. As you say, leisure activities are now not possible because of a risk, to everyone else that's there. And, you've just got to do it for the sake of the community. Communitarianism. Oh, communitarianism. Yep. That sounds a bit like communism.
Absolutely.
And one of the things there that connects back in that with the Agenda 2030 and obviously the World Economic Forum, who've been, really much very visually behind what's happening, openly coming out now in the papers. You've got all these people in the World Economic Forum saying that this is the Great Reset and that, that we're not going to miss this opportunity to reset the world, the economy, the way we think about races, the way we think about everything. All these things you see in the background happening with the, with the self-identification, with color, all these connecting into things that they're talking about. And funnily enough that. But also you'll note that when their own main videos, so they're sort of marketing videos, they talk about their fourth industrial revolution, which is the revolution not of normal energy systems and economy, but of the remaking of human beings. And they're openly saying that. Now, isn't it funny? They want us to get used to the idea of everyone having injections, not only everyone having injections, but of modified RNA. And things like that. And they're talking about the next revolution is changing you. They said you will be unrecognizable. They talk about we won't be able to think of humans as biological things anymore. This is what they're talking about. And they would like to use modified DNA and technologies, embeddable technologies, to remodel human beings. And here we are being told that they want to use, modified RNA injections in us to start changing how we function at that level and getting us used to that, almost with a softly, look, all these lovely modified RNA technologies and the wonders they can do for us, like saving us from coronaviruses. What next? Right? Yeah. What next? Because they've already said they want to remake human beings.
And people have said that this is kind of like a culmination of transhumanism, where AI and human human bodies and human brains kind of merge together.
Yeah.
And they say that, I've heard it said that why this is happening now is because all the infrastructure is now being assembled and the technologies are all here now, that these people have got all these insane psychopathic plans, and all the enabling technologies are now available. We've got Elon Musk with his SpaceX satellite fleet that's allegedly going to play a role in this. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. I don't know. But everything that Bruce has just said, everything that Bruce has just said, I've read all the same stuff, and I don't know all the details. But yep, that's what it looks like. It is the Matrix. It's something very similar to what was in the Matrix film. And there's that other patent, I forget the name of it, where I think it's one of Gates's patents, and it's not the ID 2020. It's that other one where it's based on a cryptocurrency system which is linked to your bodily processes or something. I forget the exact name of it. And it is
digital mining with your mind or something.
That's right. It's mining your digital currency with human activity or something. It's really flipping Matrix type.
But we talk about the merging here of AI, and this is something that a lot of researchers have spoke about over the years, and how you've hit the nail on the head there, Andrew, how everything is kind of culminated now, and all the technology is available, and they've worked for decades on this. They got us addicted to smartphones. So now we're all using the track and trace app. Now we're all used to having our head buried in that while they can do what they want. We're otherwise distracted. They've got ourselves arguing with each other on Facebook, on other platforms. We've got people taking photos of themselves and making money from it. That's their job, Then they got us addicted to the wearables. So it was the smart watches. It was the smart glasses. It was all these other things. Children have got it as well. Now they're going to move on to the implantables. So the RFID chip and all that stuff. So that is one aspect of it. The other aspect was getting us used to paying without physical cash. Now, cashless society is probably a show on its own, and I might touch on it maybe on the next show, because I do feel like this is a subject now that's getting so dangerous, so close to everybody's heart, that I feel like this needs to be discussed more. And I think cashless society is another huge agenda, and the more that this has gone on, the more that agenda has come to the forefront for me personally. And people, they won't take money off you because it's paper and it can contain germs, but when you've paid, they give you a paper receipt. So it's all these kind of just hypocrisies of it all, right? When you actually think about it logically,
I had one little point to what you were saying there, Kieran, which you made me think of when you were going through that, and this is that a lot of people don't really want to have stuff injected into their body, all right? Just generally. So people have talked about having an implantable chip to get into a place of work, and I think there are one or two places that is real now, maybe in the US, I don't know about UK, and they don't really want to have a credit card on an implantable chip.
Sweden, they like it.
Yes, Sweden, yeah.
But if you're going to die from a virus and have a jab, you don't mind something having it in your body for that, do you? You don't mind having a jab to protect you from a disease or death or pain, but you do mind it for credit cards or whatever. So I think if you think of it, that's why they're using this ruse with the virus to get the implantable bit into your body, rather than just
get used to it.
A contactless card or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely going to talk about cashless society on another show. But just quickly, when I was talking about people getting you used to this and indoctrinating you for decades, for when this moment finally happens. I mean, I saw an advert the other day for it's called Go Henry, and it's a credit card for children, and you can now pay pocket money onto a credit card for children, and certain stores such as Argos or Sainsbury's or whatever will accept this, so children can go and spend their money using contactless.
Right.
And if that's not indoctrination, I don't know what is.
Yeah, you want to get the children. Yes, because the children are always the focus of these things, because they know that some of us older people, we won't buy it. We don't like, as you get older and older, you don't like change and all the rest. Really, the focus will be on children. I mean, look what they're doing in the schools. Kids having to sit in little micro bubbles and getting used to it. You all got the masks and all that. Because if you can get them, that's the next generation done. And this has always been a long game, these kind of social changes, isn't it? You know, that if you can get the children completely bonkers so that they're having to live in this madness and that they've accepted it, then you're done. Right, because the next generation it's normal for them. They've had the RNA vaccine. They've had the years of it in a cubicle at school with a mask on and the government propaganda blaring into their heads. Once you get that done, it's job done, isn't it? The rest of us will die off, and that warning will be lost to them, right? Because the children don't really get it. They will accept that brainwashing open-mindedly, especially if their parents are going along with it. But, you know, enough with the teachers, the TV, and all the rest of it. So I think that's where we have to really keep an eye, is the focus they're going to put on children, you know, and this really what I call child abuse. What you can see is openly happening now is a kind of child abuse.
It is.
And it will be, to get them used to a cashless society, get them those cards, get them accepting these vaccines at school and stuff, you know, and in the end, the few of us that dissent, it wouldn't matter. So you kind of have to be aware that that's going to be the focus on children.
Yeah, I mean, we've got 5 minutes left now, so I just want to hand over to you two for a couple of minutes each to kind of have your final say on it for tonight. Anyway, Andrew, we'll go with you. Anything you kind of want to pass over to the people that are watching this?
Well, I think you know, you do need to be thinking about the future, because certainly from where I'm sitting, it's not looking great right now. Whilst it seems that there are people who are starting to pay more attention, it's still not enough. And I've been thinking in the last couple of days, perhaps we should be thinking about living without a government. How can we get, in other words, how can we peacefully move to a situation without Boris Johnson in charge and the other power structures? They all need to go. You know, I've said for a while, BBC has to go, all of it, or certainly all the news reporting side, maybe the entertainment side too, so much predictive programming. All that's got to go now. It's not functioning for us. It's funded by too many special interests, or too much of it special interest funding. Same with the government. They're not so. Now the NHS has now actually been turned into something which isn't serving our needs at all, except maybe emergency needs. But the general needs now, if you can forget it, you know. So that's all got to go. As if you've been saying, Kieran, the monetary system, it's got to go. It can't function like it is for in an honest way. It's too corrupted. It's too far gone in terms of what it should be doing to help people. You know, we've got to. They're kind of right. We've got to have a great reset, but not their reset, because see where they want their reset to be. They've already told us what they want their reset to be, and we can see that's just a nightmare scenario. It is, all the dystopian things. It's insurgent, it's divergent, it's 1984, it's Brave New World, it's all of those things. Elements of all those things, some kind of quasi the gestalt of all those things, and we don't want that. And what I've tried to do, going away from this core issue a little bit, is I've tried to expose the information about free energy. I know that the people that are running all of this have the technology to give us free energy. No global warming, none of that rubbish. We can travel across the solar system in a flash with the technology that they've got. But to get access to that, we need a spiritual revolution within ourselves as well. We need to be able to act responsibly as sovereign people. And that's a big problem. So even if we could get rid of all the politicians, all of the media, all of that lot, and just have everyone like they are now, how would they manage in their own lives? How would they manage their own thoughts and their own freedoms? Could they do it? Could they act responsibly and to everyone else? So we've got to think about those things as well, and how communities are rebuilt in a way that means that sovereign individuals respecting one another. How do we do that? Can that be done?
Okay. So and Bruce, final word from yourself.
Yeah, I mean, to follow on a bit there, I do think we need to be able to find ways to move away from that fear that we need the government or that we need those power people, and to whether that's forming community networks. Certainly on some scale, the people that know that this is going where it's going and how serious it is, they need to, if they're not already, be forming those networks across the country with other people that are aware, so that if it gets really bad, you can cut off from where society's going. But I mean, we would hope to, before that, of course, to encourage the community at wide to understand you don't need these people. That even from a very logical point of view, we worry, what we do out the politicians. Well, most of what happens in our country is done by the people working in various offices and bureaucrats. Not the politicians. Right? You suddenly, if you lose all these MPs, it's not the collapse of civilization. They're not the ones actually making the power stations work or the food grid work. They're not, right? So there shouldn't be that fear that what would we do without them? Trust me, it's not them that's doing that work, right? We don't need them. Also, in terms of this, I mean, the vaccine and stuff. I mean, one of the things I'd call people to look into. I mean, just to consider, look with these technologies like the CRISPR gene drive technologies and stuff, which I think are potentially some of the most frightening technologies. Also, the most wondrous, for curing diseases potentially. There's some of the most frightening technologies that you can use to completely eradicate human beings with a few changes propagated into the genome. And then you look and see who are the chief funders at the moment. You've got DARPA and the Gates Foundation, right? It's the two of the biggest funders for a technology where you can modify the genome in such a way that if you reproduce, you will pass on traits such as, it could be a disease trait, it could be infertility, and these are people talking about depopulation, right? That they can ensure the total eradication of either certain populations or the entire human race. Now, are we just going to allow DARPA and the Gates Foundation and stuff to push that on us while they're talking about putting modified RNA in us and stuff? I mean, at what point do you click and say there's something very, very dangerous happening here it's so serious that you can't just sit back and think, I think it'll be all right. I don't want to put my head up. Because Christ, I mean, if it goes all the way where some of these maniacs want it to go, there's no "I told you so." That's the sad thing. It won't be that we're all sitting here saying "I told you," because it'd be so bad. There's be no one to say that to. It'll be so bad. So now's the time you've got to look at things. Look at it.
Very, very well said from both of you. I mean, I just kind of want to end a little bit more on a high, if you don't mind. Really, for those people that are watching, I would assume the people that have tuned into this will be along the same line of thinking that we are. But if you can share this video or any information that I will post in the comments from my two guests tonight, if you can share that with anyone that is kind of on the fence about all this, please do, because I think that's what it is. The spiritual awakening that Andrew spoke of is spiritual, but it's also physical, and it's us standing up, and it's us kind of saying, no, I'm not going to wear a mask. No, I'm not going to do this. No, I'm not going to do that. And it's standing up to this, I guess, tyranny, and that's what it is. It is tyranny, and we need to stand up to this, and we need to just say no, because we are the many and they are the few. And obviously, I think the more this goes on, the more people are waking up, and that's why they progress it faster. They bring in stricter measures at a quicker pace, but we need to just react faster. So for those that are watching, thank you for tuning in. Bruce, thank you very much for coming on. Andrew, a pleasure as always.
One very quick thing I'd say, because you say happy note. One happy note people should take away is virtually no one's dying of this now in Europe.
Yeah, I think very good point. Yeah, very good point. Very, very good point. I think, again, thinking out loud, we'll have part 2 on this next time in a couple of weeks. God knows what would have happened between now and then. And I'll get you two back on. I can see Mark Conlon is commenting here. The Birmingham gathering on the 15th of August. If anyone's near there, it's happening all over the country. You just have to Google where it's happening. Go to your nearest one. Show your support. I'll try and get Mark on the next show as well, and we'll have a 4-way to discuss this. But yeah, thank you very much for coming on, guys. Enjoy the rest of your evening. It's getting late. And for everyone watching, thank you very much. And until next time, take care.
Thank you, Kieran. Thank you, Andrew. Appreciate it.